Welcome to Real News from the Blaze. It's the top of the hour. Here are just some of the headlines we're following right now. For the first time in a generation, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has granted a license for the construction of 2 new reactors. The Atlanta-based Southern Company, which was granted those licenses, hopes to have the nuclear reactors operational in the next 4 years. The NRC last granted such a license in 1978, just a year before 3 Mile Island. While opponents of the project say that this is the wrong time to be promoting nuclear energy, coming so close as it does to Japan's Fukushima disaster. Supporters see the move as a way to kick the country's dependence on foreign oil. And what is being criticized as another example of executive overreach, President Obama today granted 10 states waivers from portions of No Child Left Behind. The 10-year-old law was designed to quantify school performance through student testing and has come under fire from both parents and teachers for being inflexible. The president claims his move would, quote, set higher, more honest standards in exchange for more flexibility and was necessary after consistent congressional inaction. Well, those are just some of the headlines at this hour. More of the real news you're not getting, you'll get right now.
Breaking news tonight. This just in. Real news from the Blaze.
Welcome, everybody. You may have seen the headlines today about the landmark settlement that will help heal the still open wounds of the country's housing crisis. Well, in a press conference this morning, Attorney General Eric Holder announced what has been touted in the mainstream media as the latest step in, as Holder put it, righting the wrongs that led to our nation's housing market collapse and economic crisis. 5 banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Ally Financial, and Citigroup, have all agreed to a $26 billion settlement with the federal government and 49 participating states to cover alleged fraudulent foreclosure practices. Well, that money will be distributed to, quote, qualified homeowners to be used towards refinancing loans or for other forms of relief, including $2,000 cash payouts to borrowers who lost their homes to shady foreclosure practices. $17 billion of this settlement will go toward foreclosure prevention measures like lowering the principal balances for mortgage holders that owe more than their houses are worth. So Washington, has it finally stuck it to big banking? Well, maybe not so much. You may recall the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act passed just 2 years ago. It was an attempt to bail out Main Street by imposing regulation and penalties on Wall Street. Well, in the absence of being able to hike interest rates on people who defaulted on credit card payments, the bank instead raised them for everybody else. And what about health care reform? Have you gotten that letter that your premiums are going up? You will. So this settlement, while making for great headlines at a time when so many of us need some good news, is it actually just the latest push-pull between industry and government? And in the end, will we all end up paying the bill? How do we stop this vicious cycle? Joining us at the table tonight is Kayleigh McEnany, a columnist at the International Business Times. Welcome, Kayleigh.
Thank you.
Good to have you. But Will, I want to start first with you. I know you feel passionately about this home mortgage crisis and what our government announced today. Tell us about it.
So let's start with, will this help the housing crisis? What kind of news is this? Beyond just being a headline, as you suggested. I would offer you, it's not good news, it's not bad news, it's really just no news. It is no solution towards our housing crisis. And I'm just going to try to put an umbrella over this, put it in context.
Hold on, Kayleigh. Will has a notepad, and
I've seen.
Okay.
So does he in the green room.
She knows about the notepad.
It's really actually
Visuals.
the 6th character on the show.
I like it.
The total value of the housing market is $17 trillion. That means if all of our homes in the United States were sold and there was some willing buyer, it'd be worth $17 trillion. It's backed by $11 trillion in mortgages. That means of that value, there's about $11 trillion in debt backing it up. $750 billion of that is homeowners underwater. So there's $750 billion floating out there in homes that just aren't worth what they're paid for.
Okay.
This is a $26 billion package, which you just talked about, Amy, in the news. That is a drop in the bucket. It will make no substantive impact on the housing crisis and housing market. Now, I just want to tell you this. Just because it's nothing doesn't mean it's not strategic. We've talked about this. 3 ways to handle the housing crisis. 1, defaults. Allow everybody to just have the homes be foreclosed, default on their homes, have a market liquidation event, get the government out of housing. That would be what would have to happen to make that happen, and you get real home prices. 2nd, have the government come in and write down the values of homes. That have to be done on the backs of taxpayers.
Can you explain that to everybody? Write down the value of the home. What does that mean?
You paid $200,000 for a house that's only worth $120,000. The government will write down the value of your home down to $120,000. Where does that 80 come from? The taxpayer.
Got it.
That $80,000 write down. And the last I have written here as muddle. That is, Let the government tinker into the housing market, reduce interest rates for several years, and hope that in 3 years, home prices have picked up and the burden on homeowners is less. This program that was announced today firmly fits in the muddle solution. This is what they plan on doing. Muddling in the market, trying to ease it a little bit and hope home prices pick up.
Just to clarify, Will, your point, you said $750 billion of bad home money underwater is there. So today was 26. Well, I just did a little math because of your charts here. So that's still $744 billion of underwater money that isn't being covered by today's announcement, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, okay. I think there's more to this, though, than just what's happened today, right? The average home price in the U.S. right now is somewhere between $200,000 and $230,000. These people that are supposed to get relief, they're going to get between $1,500 and $2,000. So anybody, as we've been doing the math, sees not really a big deal. But there was something that I thought was particularly interesting, and that's that in New York, California, Florida, the state's attorney general were not interested initially in doing this. They didn't like it. Now, why didn't they like it? Clearly, there's some political posturing going on. But Schneiderman, the New York State Attorney General, decided to come out and say that he thinks this is important because it sets the framework for down the line holding Wall Street accountable, holding the banks accountable for this process. So what it seems like it's possible to me here is that the precedent has been set that the government can go back to this till and get more money and do more of this sort of redistributive economics. I think that's the only way that it could be significant because obviously, well, you're right. I mean, on a day-to-day basis, $2,000 is not going to keep many people in their homes for long.
Doesn't that terminology bother you a little bit, though? I looked at this, and in the Obama administration, you can basically boil this down to evil bank, vulnerable lender. And they're setting the framework, but they're setting the framework to demonize the banks. When this is a government problem that has been going on for 30 years, since the Community Reinvestment Act in 1977. The banks were forced to give these loans. And evil bank is not what it comes down to. And for the Obama administration to be using this sort of rhetoric, it's just simply disingenuous.
Yeah. And can we also point out that Fannie and Freddie are exempt from this? So the two names you heard most often with respect to the housing crisis, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, completely exempt, not mentioned. Why is that? Why is that?
Great point.
They remained very serious, possibly threats to the American economy if they continue to go as they are right now. I mean, they haven't been addressed at all. And I think what you say is true.
Is it political? Is it political, though? Is there some political
of course, it's very political.
Is all of this political and
ownership,
strategic for an election season as well?
People have been holding up home ownership as this critical part of the American dream. And so the politics of this are very broad. But, I would say that what we're seeing here, you're going to see more of this down the line. You're going to see more of these redistributive tactics. It's good election year politics. I really do. But on the banking side, there was some bad stuff.
I have to push back on Kaylee just a little bit.
I'll hand it to Will in 1 second. Just the robo-signing, the no-doc loans, those sorts of things. This is punitive damages for bad banking activity.
Well, that's,
we have to move.
But
so now
isn't the free
but the
market
government gets a free
punishing
pass.
No. Now, we've moved beyond my framework of this conversation of whether or not it will work to solve the housing crisis. And now we're talking about what you described. Is this bad bank, vulnerable homeowner? Well, there are so many things going on in the housing market over the last 30 years. You pointed to one of them, the Community Reinvestment Act, making credit easy. The government played a role. But let's not say that the banks...
Played a big role.
Let's not say the banks were these Puritan, nice, Puritan-driven, free capitalists over the last 30 years. They were making bad loans, peddling bad junk. They knew it.
Why does the government get to be the Puritan, though?
This is essentially the government playing the role of mediator in a lawsuit.
But why don't you then let the free market then punish those banks?
Exactly. And to this point, I will say there are some good things that are going to come of this. I'm looking at a CNN article that says it's going to eliminate robo-signing altogether and service abuses like harassing delinquent borrowers for payments, and include principal reductions more often in their mortgage modification programs. Not to say there's not some good, but when I hear the phrase government/industry settlement, I become really uncomfortable. Once again, we have the government meddling, and when the government meddles, they create this artificial reality that isn't really reality that then they have to come in and fix yet again in the future.
There's a basic issue of fairness, too. I mean, some people have been struggling to pay their mortgages, but they won't qualify for some of these special programs. And so, on the one hand, you're saying, well, we're going to help out some people, but where are you really drawing that line? Now, this specifically...
It's all fair.
Yeah, I mean, this specifically we're talking about here is damages for bad lending practices, but beyond that, they have been floating this idea of billions and billions of dollars going to some people to help them with mortgages when a lot of people are struggling.
But your question was fair. I mean, why is the government needed to resolve this dispute, which could have been lawsuits between banks? One bank sold bad loans to other banks without disclosure requirements, with robo-signatures, with things like this going on. Again, we're not talking about these innocent actors with the banks, but did we need the government to serve the role as kind of mediator between these two. I don't know the answer.
But Will,
to that.
does it bother you a bit that Obama and his administration gets to swoop in and be sort of the savior here? And there's no culpability for, you know, the Carter guys back in the day and the Clinton guys who have sustained the Community Reinvestment Act, which you've got to admit played some part in the mess we're in now. Does it bother you they get to be the savior? And that's the appearance I got today when Obama spoke. He was the savior.
Yeah, let's broaden this conversation out, because I think you're also talking about the politics of this. Of
yes.
Who is the victim by the, you know, as defined by the political class, and who is the savior as defined by the political class, and who is going to pay this bill? That even if this were a fair settlement with these banks, you know, the banks are going to pass on the cost to somebody, to some portion of the free market, to some consumer, and we see that over and over again, where it's kind of like airy-fairy. Where is this money going to really go? Where is it going to come from? And I think we've even seen that in the healthcare debate that we had this week, with the Catholic churches fighting back on this, you know, conscience clause issue, and you know, the women's group saying, well, women should be getting these contraceptives for free, as if they are free.
Yeah,
but they're
nothing's
not
for free.
free. So do you have this sense that when we have these discussions that we're forgetting that there are costs, and these costs are passed on in some way?
Yeah, I mean, the banks actually, at some level, will be kind of investing in properties that they own. I mean, they're actually shoring up their portfolios by injecting money back into these homes, because as we've discussed before, they don't actually want to play landlord to all of these things. Now, at a localized level, and this is probably one of the ways you could deal with this, we talked about the modeling, or at a localized level, you could have communities where, you know, people have started to deal with these mortgages in different ways. They rent out the property to the homeowner still in it, because that's better than having on the market. There are modifications, but the government's coming in and basically saying, we're going to take money from one, give to another, in order to promote this policy that seems like it's just another Band-Aid on a big wound.
Because we have said that this group of people is more sympathetic than that group.
Exactly.
It's imperative that the government be painted as a savior for Barack Obama. He needs that to happen, and that's why he needs Freddie and Fannie Mac to not be part of this. Those are government institutions. And he's going to, once again, this is part of a larger argument where he's going to ally himself as, I am an ally of the suffering, I am an ally of the so-called middle class, although I hate that terminology, and I'm here to help people in need, whereas these mean old banks are here to take their money and do nasty stuff to them. Yes, stuff was done that was wrong, but let's not be mistaken about what's happening here.
Don't we do this, though, in American politics all down the line?
Yes.
I mean, we do this in terms of transferring the cost of Social Security from the old to the young. And we don't talk about, where's this money come from?
The victim is always the consumer, the taxpayer. And I love that Real News pointed this out, because it is so true. The consumer always pays. When you levy a tax on a business, the consumer will pay in some form or another. In this instance, and Will will probably know better than me, I predict a slew of new banking fees. I think there are going to be new fees attached to this, and we're going to pay. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, what I would say to you guys is this. I am always happy to criticize the Obama administration for their ideological miscues and their attempts to recreate health care in their best image. But if you had a Republican president and a Republican-controlled Congress, you'd be seeing something very similar regarding the housing market. And
it's smart politics. I think
it's not just smart politics. It's the only thing they can do. They're banking on housing prices coming back in 3 or 4 years, which, by the way, to me sounds like it could be incredibly optimistic. We have no idea where home prices will be in 3 years.
Home prices are still probably inflated.
And they can't let any of these other things happen. They can't let home prices fall. It'll suck the entire economy down. What I'm telling you is you're dealing with the politics of emergency. Really,
You're
really
right. The Republican would have taken
emergency.
credit too. You're absolutely right. And to me, everyone in government is culpable. Everyone has some fault in this, because it's gone on for 30 years.
But to remind all of our viewers, there is no such thing as a free lunch or a free house. In just a few minutes, Congressman Paul Ryan will take to Washington, D.C. stage and outline his vision for the American idea. Our own Essie Cupp is in our nation's capital, and we'll talk to her about that very topic when we come back.
From the co-creator of Homeland and executive producer of 24, a homegrown terrorist is targeting the U.S. government. But only one man believes the threat is real. Special Agent Gideon Davis must risk everything to save countless lives and protect the future of America. Read Hard Target by Howard Gordon.
Hoodie Footy is the hottest Valentine's Day gift, and it just got hotter with the new Leopard Hoodie Footy. The new leopard print has all the benefits of a Hoodie Footy with a wild new twist. Hoodie Footy is head-to-toe comfort made from marshmallow soft fleece that keeps the cold out and the cozy in. A Hoodie Footy moves with her. The footies keep her toes nice and warm, like the pajamas that she had when she was a kid. The original Hoodie Footy is so popular, it now comes in lots of great styles. If you really want to heat things up, Pajamagram has great deals on sweet and sexy gift sets. One for her sweet side and one for her sexy side. Get them both and save over $50. Call or go online now to pajamagram.com to order her Valentine's Day gift from Pajamagram. Every order comes with free gift packaging. Delivery is guaranteed for Valentine's Day, so order now.
Tatler reusable canning lids. Family owned since 1976.
Reusable.
That's right. Tatler reusable canning lids.
Reusable.
Yes, reusable with a lifetime guarantee. Made in America. BPA free.
Reusable.
Tatler reusable canning lids. Because those who can do.
Reusable.
Get rid of the disposable lid. Go to reusablecanninglids.com. Tatler reusable canning lids.
Our kids are like hostages in those public schools. We can't do anything without bringing the wrath of the teacher on our kids. And the last thing a mom is going to do is do something that her teacher can take it out on her child in that classroom.
Well, today kicked off the annual Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC for short. Leading conservative lawmakers and thinkers from around the country have descended upon the nation's capital for 3 days of talks, speeches, and brainstorming sessions, and a little bit of partying about issues and ideas that might propel America forward. Of course, the focus today was largely on November.
We will not let a single day pass from now until November without reminding the American people of what this president has done.
There is nothing this president has done that makes this economy better.
If it's halftime in America, I'm fearful of what the final score is going to be if we let this president start the second half as a quarterback.
Certainly winning the presidential election is top of mind for most conservatives, lawmakers, and voters alike, but should that be the extent of it? In just a few moments from now, Congressman Paul Ryan will give a speech that has many top conservatives on Twitter and elsewhere for that matter buzzing. According to reporters who've seen advance copies of the congressman's text, the theme is the American idea and asserts, quote, boldness and clarity offer the greatest opportunity to create a winning coalition. We will not only win the next election, we have a unique opportunity to sweep and remake the political landscape. Basically, Paul Ryan will contend that it's not enough to talk about how terrible Barack Obama is. Conservatives have to prove it with big, bold ideas. It's a vision for the future that's apparently getting lots of folks excited. So we come to the dilemma of the current GOP presidential field, all but one of whom have failed to capture the excitement and imagination of our nation's youth. It's a voting bloc that is largely responsible for the current White House resident, President Obama. But critics note candidate Obama was a lot more style than substance. And as the congressman from Wisconsin is about to argue, we need much more of the latter. So what are the big, bold ideas we need to be hearing in the next few weeks and months that could change the course of this race and perhaps this country? I'll send that softball question out to S.E. Cupp, who spent the day at CPAC. Welcome, S.E. Are you there?
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hey.
So tell us, how is it down there in our nation's capital?
Well, CPAC is as crazy as ever. You know, it's always the biggest gathering of conservatives every year, but of course, in election year, there's some added interest. I was thinking back 4 years ago this week, I watched from this very space as Mitt Romney announced he was quitting the race. Clearly, a lot's changed in 4 years. Mitt Romney comes into CPAC still very much the front runner. Even though there's a lot of buzz about other speakers and indeed other candidates, let's not forget CPAC is still very much an establishment event, and all of the establishment media is here. The establishment Republicans are here. Everyone shows up. So it's a nice mix of, you know, far left conservative wonks, Tea Partiers, Ron Paulites, and of course, establishment GOP.
But S.C., let's also remind, or at least inform our viewers that CPAC is a very young group of people, lots of young people from college. I don't think that Republicans and conservatives get enough credit for the fact that they draw all these people from all around the country, and that Ronald Reagan has a lot to do with that when he made his trips to CPAC.
It is. Actually, over half of the attendees this year are under the age of 25. It's a mind-blowing figure, in fact. And every year, I note when I come to CPAC, and I've come for the past 8 or 5 years, the crowds get bigger and younger. That's incredibly, heartening to see as a youngish conservative myself to see so many college kids, you know, taking time out of school, spending their breaks, a weekend, to come and listen to big speeches, big ideas, sign up for, you know, campaigns and summer internships, meet fellow conservatives. It's really great to see.
SC, Will Kane here.
As if she wouldn't know.
Hey, SC, where's the buzz? Who's got the buzz? Does Rick Santorum have a ton of buzz coming after his big victories this week? Is that who everybody's talking about? I'm wondering, is CPAC going to be this thing that continues his momentum, or is it going to kind of fall flat after this weekend?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. It was the #1 question on my mind coming out of Tuesday. On the ground, what was the discussion going to be about? Was it going to be about Santorum? And in fact, it absolutely has. I polled, very unscientifically, I'd say about 50 people today of varying age groups and demographics. And actually, you'll see that package on tomorrow's show. But I was shocked to see, I'd say about half of those people polled were going for Rick Santorum. They were really excited. And I asked, would you have said that a week ago? And they admitted, no. They might have liked Rick Santorum. They might have thought he was a good conservative, but they didn't feel like he was electable until this week. It wasn't Iowa. It was this Tuesday. There is huge buzz for him. Now, whether he can build on that momentum or not, we won't know until tomorrow when he's set to speak. He speaks in the morning at 10:25, and then at 1:30 he does a meet and greet with press, and it's open to CPAC. We'll see if he has what a lot of people say he needs, a presidential moment.
SC?
If he can have a presidential moment here at CPAC, then, you know, sky's the limit.
SC, I just wanted to know, I've been once to CPAC, and already, this was some years ago, and Ron Paul was getting a lot of buzz. And this was not this year. I'm just wondering, what are you hearing from the Ron Paul camp? They're usually pretty easy to pick out of the crowd. They're usually not shy about discussing their respect and love for Dr. Paul. Are you hearing from them that they think that this is just a movement now they're happy to be a part of? Or are there some holding on to the possibility that we could actually see President Paul?
Yeah, I mean, CPAC's always a big, you know, magnet for Ron Paul fans. They usually kind of take over the place. It ends up being something of a Ron Paul slumber party. And the straw poll that happens at every CPAC is usually won handily by Ron Paul. It's the only thing he actually ever does win. But actually, of the 50 people that I polled today, I heard maybe 1 or 2 strong Ron Paul support. And it came from like over 50-year-olds. So I gotta say, it's a Rick Santorum crowd right now. I don't know if that's, you know, representative. Ron Paul still might do well in the straw poll, although he's not coming to CPAC this year. He's out on the trail. So that might play into it as well. His son, Rand Paul, is speaking later today. So, you know, I'm sure there's some interest around there, but
SC? I wanted to ask you, when we talk about that youth vote, which is so important, I usually take Ron Paul out of it because he automatically, you know, brings so much of the youth in. But if you took him out of it, what are you hearing on the ground from young people in the under 35 bracket, let's say? Are they moving toward one of the other candidates? Is someone like a Santorum exciting them right now?
You know, it was funny. I heard from a lot of 20-somethings, young 20-somethings, some in college, some just out of college today, who were really giving Rick Santorum a listen. I think the thing holding people back from Rick Santorum this entire election has been electability. The second people see that he can win votes in not just a Missouri or a Minnesota, but a Colorado, especially after Mitt Romney had spent so much money there and so much time and won so handily against McCain in 2008, their ears are sort of perking up to him. They're excited to see what he has to say. Now, you can say that about every non-Romney candidate thus far. We'll see if this is, you know, Santorum's moment, and that will sort of ebb and flow like the rest of them. But I think people are very interested in giving Santorum his run right now, and they think that he's earned it and he deserves it, and they're curious to see where he goes from here.
So, Essie, we're very curious to know where Paul Ryan is going to be going tonight with some of those big ideas. And Ronald Reagan, he went to CPAC 12 times. He was the oldest candidate ever to run for President of the United States, and he got the youth vote 60-40 in 1984. And we know that Ronald Reagan was a guy of big ideas, and that was inspiring. And I think it's part of Ron Paul's popularity is that he's a guy with big ideas, and young people like that too. Tonight, from Paul Ryan, what do you think we can expect in terms of his big ideas for the conservative movement moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, Paul Ryan's particular appeal is that he can marry two kinds of conservatives that were once thought to be at opposing ends of the spectrum, the social conservative and the fiscal conservative. He's mainly known as our resident economic wonk, but if you read a lot of what Paul Ryan has written and listen a little closely to what he says, he's often talking about the moral implications of economic decisions and the economic implications of morality. And I expect him, because I heard him speak earlier today, I expect him to address that marriage in his speech tonight, at least in some part. The idea, especially in the wake of the Health and Human Services provision in Obamacare regarding contraception, I expect him to lean heavily on the idea that our fiscal health it cannot be divorced from our moral health. He always makes a very compelling argument for this. It's a nuanced idea, but I think it could really resonate during a time when people are kind of over the idea that you have to be a fiscal conservative or a social conservative. So, Essie, that actually, I think, is a thing of the past.
Yeah, tell us about that. You're at CPAC right now in Washington with all these folks all milling about at the Omni Showroom. Has there been a lot of discussion and reverberation about that Obamacare conscience clause mandate? Are people talking about that?
They are. The talk is mostly strategy. How long is this going to last? How do conservatives sort of capitalize on it? Was this calculated? There was a good Politico story out this morning that really cataloged just how seriously this issue was addressed by the Obama administration. This was not a flippant decision. They had meeting after meeting, discussion after discussion. Biden, Daley, both weighed in, two big Catholics in the administration, both weighed in to say this might cost us politically. The Obama administration went ahead with it anyway. So people are talking about the political calculus of this, whether it was a mistake, whether it was a judgment call.
Are they up in arms? Do they feel passionately?
Yeah, most people here are really passionate about this issue, and they think it could be a linchpin, not for conservatives, like Will and I talked about the other night, not for conservatives to sort of harp on the abortion aspect or the contraceptive aspect of it, but to talk about the larger picture of Obama as someone who is very comfortable with mandating all kinds of aspects of our lives. So I think the strategy is to build on that narrative.
Hey, Essie, when does Mitt Romney speak? Does he speak tomorrow as well?
He does.
You know, I know this isn't so much just for Essie, but for all of us, one of the things I'll be interested in, you're talking about this youth vote. I think one of the appeals of Ron Paul is that he has a very clear message. It's not just that he has big ideas, that's Newt, right? It's that Ron Paul has a clear message. I stand for liberty, and he carries that out consistently, and this is the exact thing that is burdening Mitt Romney. He has no definition and can provide none for himself. Tomorrow, I think, could and should be a big moment for him. Can he define himself?
I think you're right, Will, that it does have to be a big moment. I mean, you're talking about Ron Paul's consistency.
Right.
And that has made him a darling of a certain element, not just this year, but for years. I mean, this guy has maintained this momentum for years. I'm also glad, Will, that you brought up Newt Gingrich. It has been radio silence. Radio silence on Newt Gingrich at CPAC. I have not heard his name uttered, and it's bizarre because he appears on the program something like 7,000 times, whether he's screening a movie or Callista's giving a talk or he's set to appear or he's going to do a book signing. He's all over the place. No one is talking about Newt Gingrich.
Wow.
Very funny. Well, Essie, we look forward to seeing your straw poll tomorrow night. Thank you very much. And a little later in the show.
Hey, guys, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
A little later in the show, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, congressional approval is at a new all-time low. are there any good guys left on Capitol Hill? But up next, our resident good guy, Scott Baker, brings us his top 3 stories from the Blaze. Stay with us.
Bringing a firearm into your home is one of the most important decisions you can make. If you are considering gun ownership, CheaperThanDirt.com is here to help you make a responsible and informed choice. We understand it is a personal decision how you choose to protect your family. We offer thousands of choices of firearms, ammunition, and accessories to suit your individual needs. Be responsible, be proactive, and exercise your Second Amendment right. Find us online at CheaperThanDirt.com. That's CheaperThanDirt.com.
Understanding our Constitution has never been more important. That's why you tune into GBTV, because you care about our founding principles. The first step in protecting our Constitution is knowing and understanding it. For a limited time, FreedomWorks will send you a free copy just for the asking. And for a small donation, we will send you additional pocket constitutions to share with your friends and neighbors. Go to FreedomWorksForUs.com now. Know the Constitution and work to defend it. Get your free copy now at FreedomWorksForUs.com.
You know that it's hard to please your kids with every meal. So, what about in times of emergency? Will they eat the food you have stored away? That's why I have food insurance. I love their freeze-dried entrees that are easy to prepare, taste great, and last up to 25 years. But most importantly, they're delicious and please even the toughest critics. Go to foodinsurance.com and order today.
I'm Robert Shapiro. Over 1 million people have discovered how easy it is to use LegalZoom for important legal documents. At LegalZoom, we'll help you incorporate your business, file a patent, make a will, and more. You can complete our online questions in minutes. Then we'll prepare your legal documents and deliver them directly to you. So start your business, protect your family, launch your dreams. At LegalZoom.com, we put the law on your side.
And for more savings, enter GBTV in the referral box at checkout. LegalZoom.com.
Lots of good things come in threes like Musketeers, Little Pigs, and the top stories from theblaze.com. Brought to us tonight by, in person, by the site's editor-in-chief, Scott Baker. Scott, what do you have for us?
Little Pigs, huh? No, number three story on the Blaze right now, not determined by me, but determined by the readers. In fact, there's well over 300 of them reading this story right this very second. I think we'll all be happy about this one. And it's entitled, "This is what happened when the BBC confronted a brutal, bigoted Facebook troll." Actually tracked the guy down. He was like hounding people's... Actually, there were usually tribute sites to dead people, and he would go onto the Facebook page and then say nasty things.
Classy man.
Right. So we've all read commenters and whatnot that we would just say, I'd like that guy to get his comments.
Oh, yeah.
This guy does. Wow. Number 2 story on the Blaze.
Wait, we have to go read to find out what his comeuppance was? You're not going to share it with
the BBC
us?
confronts him. That's why it's...
Confront him.
They say you're very cheeky.
I'm out of time now. Yeah, that was pretty much
you
it.
look exactly.
Number 2 story, though, connected also in a little bit to to Facebook. Parents murdered, this is in Tennessee, their baby orphaned, result of defriending a Tennessee father's adult daughter on Facebook. So this is a couple that was friends.
Confused. Okay.
A couple was friends with this woman. She was a little bit creepy. They defriended her. She freaks out. Apparently, she has a history of getting mad when people defriend her. Her father went and murdered the couple that defriended his daughter.
Oh, my.
Her father did this?
Her father did.
So this creepiness runs in the family?
Oh, my God. It very much does.
Oh, my goodness.
This is why Facebook is dangerous.
This is yeah. Single Facebook female.
Number 1 story on the Blaze right now, by far. Do you know the full story behind the day the music died, American Pie? This is Glenn Beck's version, and he did an epic 2 segments of that on the radio today, deconstructing line by line why the classic American song American Pie is so relevant today.
I actually listened to it. Glenn Beck's.
Our story to boost today is, and I had a lot to choose from, but it had to do with drones, and so Buck was on the panel, and I thought, so there, we got to do this one.
Not because he is a drone.
Drones, not always a good thing, drones. Continue.
Yeah, but the question is, will the EU use drones to spy and enforce regulations on farms? Sure sounds like it. So they're deploying drones because you can get a better picture of what's going on in farmlands, both, if you're dumping pesticides or animal parts or growing things you shouldn't be or violating. Mm-hmm. So the question is...
Or the aliens that go there to make the circles.
That could... I hadn't thought of that one.
Yes.
I hadn't really thought of that one. But what I'm going to know is obviously is what's happening in Europe. Could it happen here? Is it already happening? That's my question for Buck.
Well, they are using them for law enforcement purposes, so they'll fly them over your property in some places, and whatever they get off of that, they'll use in a court of law. So it can be done. I mean, I think, and as I have been arguing for a while, we will be seeing more of this as they get smaller, cheaper, and better.
In the age of Google Earth and satellite imagery down to the street level, is it really that different? Is it really that big?
Well, this is up to the second.
They actually, yeah, and they make the point that what they do is they match the drone images with the satellite imagery because you kind of have to be, lower. The one farmer gave an example where they accused him of having a building on his property that he didn't have a permit for. It was actually a haystack.
Yeah.
But a drone would have picked that up. But I don't know. I just don't like the idea of feeling like, every time I wander outside.
You're being watched.
Those black helicopters need to stop following you around.
I feel like that in New York City all the time. Why do you think I leave and go back to Pittsburgh?
No, I saw the Will Smith movie. I agree. Thanks, Scott. Congress somehow managed to pass some popular legislation today, but not without enough hiccups to prove why their approval numbers are so very, very low. That story is up next.
Here's something else the media is conveniently leaving out. The Ayatollah Khomeini, is the supreme leader now in Iran. He has just said that Israel is a cancerous tumor and must be removed. He referred to the Israeli state as the Zionist entity that is the enemy of Islam. Not Iran, Islam. By the way, this is the wrong Khomeini. This is Khomeini, and we're looking for the Khomeini. I know, it's confusing, but I think that's the one they dropped out of a coffin a few years back. Now, if you say that they're the enemy of all of Islam and they have to all be killed, doesn't that have just like a hint of genocide to it? I mean, it smacks of religious intolerance. Maybe it's just me. Where's the left on that one? Where's Nancy Pelosi talking about the dignity and worth of all human life? Where are the Occupy Wall Streeters chanting, hey, hey, ho, ho, Iran's genocide and bigotry have got to go? Where's that? Where's the President of the United States, the best friend of Israel, who's done more for Israeli-American relationships than any other president in history? They're all in the same place they always are, looking to silence their critics, place the blame with others, and allow the flames of real hatred and real violence and real bigotry to burn unabated. You are under attack, and so are your neighbors, whether they know it or not.
Are you a big Patriots fan?
Well, I'm not a giant fan of the Patriots, but I know a lot of people are, so I'm kind of hoping
I know, that's what I was thinking. A lot of people are, but I'm not really. But are you going to do a Super Bowl party or anything this weekend?
Well, I'm going to be working here this weekend, and lots of my friends are going to be doing Super Bowl parties. So.
Really? So do you hate them for that? Do you hate their guts?
No, not at all.
No, really?
Not at all. Nah.
Really?
No, not at all.
They sound like the 1%, and there you are, the 99%, working your butt off on Super Bowl Sunday, and you don't resent them?
Not at all.
Today, lawmakers in the House of Representatives overwhelmingly voted in favor of the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act, or STOCK Act, as it's come to be known, by a margin of 417 to 2, almost unanimous. The legislation is designed to prevent elected officials from profiting from information they learn as a result of their work on behalf of the people. But even this bill, designed specifically to boost low congressional approval ratings, has sparked political posturing and bickering in both chambers of Congress. Is it any wonder that we, the people, are fed up with the federal government? A new Gallup poll released today shows congressional approval is now even lower, clocking in at just 10%. But wait, there's more. A Rasmussen poll shows that a full 43% of likely voters think a group of people randomly selected from a phone book would do a better job than our current elected officials. Are they wrong? And finally, in a recent Washington Post ABC News poll, respondents indicated by a 53% majority that they would likely look around before deciding to re-elect their representative back to Congress. Well, it seems to state the obvious that there is a fundamental distrust of our legislative branch, and a recent Washington Post investigation doesn't help. The report uncovered some 33 lawmakers on both sides of the aisle who have earmarked a collective $300 million taxpayer dollars. That money went toward projects near property they own. This, according to the newspaper, was just last year, a year after a moratorium on earmarks was put in place. But as we've come to learn, sadly, there are plenty of loopholes in Washington. So are there any good guys out there? Or is this a disease without a cure? Everybody, this is so depressing. These folks, after this whole earmark debate, actually had earmarks for stuff by their own property. What are we to make of this?
Well, it's depressing that there are already reports that the congressmen, even some of the ones who were for this bill, at least in back channel, were saying, well, maybe we could put a poison pill in this. Maybe we could find a way. They didn't really want to do this. Legislation that is so obvious and so necessary. They exempted themselves from laws that the rest of U.S. citizens have to live by. And the fact that they're trying to congratulate themselves for this now explains a 10% rating.
And Kaylee, before I get to you, we did have a guest who, there was, I guess, some satellite problems, but we have him online, Drew Johnson of Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Drew, thank you for joining us. And as you know, we're having this discussion about congressional disapproval. And Kaylee, you had a point?
Well, I just wanted to tell you what they were busy doing. They were busy allotting $500,000 to decide how cocaine hurts or helps the sex drive of the Japanese quail. Allotting $593,000. Yes.
Quail, not as in Dan Quail.
No, as in the animal. This is what our Congress was busy doing. $593,000 to primate research centers to find out how the chimp brain gets the idea to throw their feces. So these are some of the things that have actually been allotted money in our Congress. And you wonder, do these guys have brains? Rather than doing the important things, cutting the spending, this is what they're doing.
Well, you wonder if they have character,
Jedediah. Exactly. I would rather pick people from the phone book as well. I have to be honest and say, because I think that random people are more in touch with common sense and aren't brainwashed. There's something in the
we're pushing this too far.
No, listen,
too far.
I'm sorry. There is something in the air in D.C.
random people to decide who goes to jail.
It's fun to be contrarian, but we don't want random people on the street running the legislative branch.
Something in the air in D.C. that just breeds corruption. Normal people go into D.C., serve for a short time, and come out completely different people. I honestly have more faith in average citizens.
Now you're getting closer to the truth. I mean, look, term limits, I think, would clean a lot of this stuff up.
Oh, you reading over here?
I may be a spy, but I can't read upside down. But Will Kane and I are on the same page. We'll talk about term limits.
No. I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of this conversation to just assume that there are somewhat 400-odd just bad people that we've elected. We just keep screwing up every 2 and 6 years and electing Scrooge McDucks and just the town, just the bad guys. We're not
Swam
just
in the vault of money.
We're not just electing bad guys. You have a system that turns seemingly innocent or good people into people you can no longer identify with. What you must do is change that environment, change that system.
Well, let me bring in Drew Johnson, Senior Fellow with the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Drew, maybe you can settle this for us. Is it the people we send there, or is it Washington that corrupts them?
There's no doubt it's the system. It's giving normal people the ability to spend, $4 trillion a year basically on whatever they want. But we can back up a little because it does take sort of a special case, a special person to want to become a congressman, because you basically have to quit your job. You have to talk about how great you are all day. It takes some arrogance. It's not everyone would do it. So you add that sort of personality.
It does attract a certain personality.
So are you saying that the narcissistic personality disorder is probably more prevalent on Capitol Hill?
I mean, I'm sitting here with a camera in front of me, and I'm not so full of myself that I would run for Congress. I mean, it takes a special person. And then you add that with the ability of spending so much money, and also the ability to spend money on something that gets you reelected, which is what we see in these earmarks and these port projects. And that's how you end up with a fairly normal but arrogant person turning corrupt.
Drew, isn't it a little unfair, though? I mean, we want to blame Congress, but the reality is that voters, specifically in districts, they like this. They actually like spending. I mean, they always go for the guy that's going to bring back more from D.C. So on the one, and I think that kind of explains how we don't like Congress, but people still sort of like their guy. So I just feel like it's really easy to just say that what Congress is doing is horrible all the time. Meanwhile, the American people are voting for the spending because they vote for the spending that they think is good for them.
You know, one thing that makes me feel better about that, of course, we hear I like my congressman because he built this Little League field and he gave money to fix some potholes. But that sort of changed since about probably 2005, 2006. Really, the Bridge to Nowhere was the catalyst for this, where people started saying, wait, Congress is spending $29 billion a year on earmarks. That money would be better left in my pocket to spend how I want. Because
and you saw
people
that
started
2006 wave election as a result.
Absolutely. Because people saw Republicans giving all the money they wanted to other Republican districts in hopes that they would be reelected. And there was really a backlash because, in Nashville, where I am, people were frustrated that they were having to spend money on the Teapot Museum in Sparta, North Carolina, $500,000, which is now out of business, or $250 million for the Bridge to Nowhere. And people started realizing that money isn't just free money, raining from heaven. It's money that comes out of their pockets.
Drew, and perhaps this is just a pessimistic view of human nature, but they say absolute power corrupts absolutely. And someone who is otherwise a good person gets into this position and everything comes out. The selfish sort of Machiavellian side of a human comes out unless you elect a guy who's accountable to perhaps a higher power or has some stake beyond being accountable to this person, this citizen, this taxpayer that they don't know. So in your view, do you think it helps having some sort of religiosity in being accountable?
I'd like to say yes, but I'm not sure that that's the case. I think the bigger case is when people run committed to reducing spending, sign the taxpayer protection pledge, things like that, that hold them responsible, because ultimately it's being responsible to your district, your constituents, more than being responsible to God that will really hold these people accountable on spending issues. Now, when it comes to morality issues, I think you might be even more on the right track. But you look at people who really are committed, the Jeff Flakes, the Tom Coburns, Jim DeMint, even on the Democratic side, the Jim Coopers and the Senator McCaskill, those people say, we think that you as constituents, you as Americans can spend money better than we can, and we make that pledge to make that happen, to spend less of your money. And when you take that sort of pledge, I think people take it seriously.
So I want to sort of throw this out to the whole table. One of the changes that we see in the polling data is that the attitude towards government is moving more towards voters wanting less of it, and that federal government is a threat to freedom. And you see this even among federal agencies and their approval ratings going down. You have Department of Education, FDA, Social Security, EPA, NASA, CDC, Defense Department. Their approval ratings all sinking over the last 12 years, except for 3 agencies that I thought might intrigue Buck.
Oh, absolutely.
The FBI, the CIA, and the IRS. And the IRS only because it was just so low, it went up just a little bit. But the public actually still has approves of the FBI and the CIA.
And if I see this, the CIA looks like it actually gained in popularity, basically because the CIA is awesome, and if you love freedom, you love the CIA.
Okay, but are we seeing a sea change in Americans' attitudes just towards the nature of federal government?
Yeah, and I think when people think in terms of security, they always think, well, that's an acceptable role for government. There's the job of securing our nation. But when you think of overstuffed bureaucracy with respect to departments of energy and education, I mean, I'm a fan of removing these departments personally. I want them all gotten rid of. Energy, education, agriculture, get rid of them all. But even people who feel that, well, they should be downsized significantly. I see that expression, by the way. I'm a radical, I know, but I do feel that way. I think with security, it is different, though. I think Americans on a widespread basis feel that security and protection is a legitimate role of government.
Well, let's talk about legitimate role of government, because we have a chart on, and Will, I know it caught your eye here, and this was from Gallup, and it's on trust and confidence in government entities to handle problems and recent trends from 1997 to 2011. I think we have it up on the screen. If you see here, you look at local government, state government, the executive branch, and legislative branch, that the trust goes in descending order. Yeah. That at local government, people trust their local government, 68%. Down at the bottom, legislative government at 31%. Will, what does this tell you about the role of government?
It's an endorsement of conservatism. Yes. It's an endorsement of a decentralized, more accountable government to you.
And so how do we get there?
Well,
follow the Constitution for starters.
Follow the Constitution. I'd love to. We still have Drew? Are you still there? Or? Oh.
I'm still here, yeah.
Drew, what do you think about term limits? Is it just a pipe dream? Because I think that without that, we're talking about corruption, we're talking about what can be done. I think without term limits, this is just all sort of aimless talk. Do you think we could ever get there? And do you agree with?
There's no aimless talk on real news.
No. I didn't mean that. I meant the talk about corruption. Real news. No. The talk about corruption, though. I mean, what do you think? Term limits. Go for it.
Honestly, I think term limits would be the best way to keep people from being so entrenched in Congress that they realize the benefits they can get by being a congressman. Because what you see is usually Congress people, they're great for the first few years, and then they realize the sorts of benefits they can have by staying in Congress and the sort of payoffs they can give to their friends, the money they can sneak back to their districts. And that really creates a lot of the problems. And obviously, Congress wasn't started to be a full-time job. It wasn't meant to have control over $4 trillion a year. It was supposed to be, 535 people getting together a couple months of the year and making sure that the Constitution was followed and money was spent well. And now it's become such a big business, such an industry, and that's where the corruption is. So I think the more we can do to not only impose things like term limits and take some of the benefits out of being in Congress away, like $285,000 a year in salary and benefits, and also reduce the size and scope of government so that they aren't as powerful.
Drew,
and another thing,
I got to cut you off. You've got a lot of good ideas there, and hopefully you'll come back to the show to share them. I might add that I think that air conditioning, it was a big problem for Washington, D.C. when they could stay all year round. Thank you, Drew, for joining us. The Island of Misfit Stories. When we return, we'll share them all with you.
Do you believe that Christians and Jews, people who are living their faith, are prepared for the kind of full frontal assault on their faith, and prepared to really truly stand through what I think you believe, and I know I believe, is coming?
Well, I do believe it's coming. And are they prepared? I think that your show is a wonderful beacon to try and prepare people for that. But I think they aren't prepared with the threats, particularly to the United States, that we're seeing from our southern border. And part of what I'm very concerned about is the influence that Iran is having on our southern border. They're having it through places like Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba, Ecuador. There's about 42,000 Iranians that are coming through posing as businessmen, coming through places like Caracas, Venezuela, and they are making their presence known south of our border and then coming in through the United States. And we have to recognize that this isn't just something in the Middle East. This is something that is coming into our border. And when the President of the United States said no to the Keystone Pipeline, that cuts us off from about 700,000 barrels of oil from Canada. That increases and links our dependence to a nation like Venezuela, so where Chavez is the leader. And so we are building them up while we're decreasing our ability to be independent. And we have an absolutely porous American border. And I'm very concerned.
Glitter bombs, FBI investigations, and a girl with a gun? No, not the awesome plot points of a summer blockbuster, just the latest installment of the segment we like to call the Island of Misfit Stories. Will, you're up first.
I am up first? Really? Oh, I wasn't expecting that. I don't know if you guys know this, but back in 1991, President George H.W. Bush, first Bush, thought about appointing Steve Jobs to his Council on Exports, President's Export Council. And, of course, when you get appointed to a council through the president, there's an FBI background search that goes on with you. And those were just released on Mr. Steve Jobs, founder of Apple. A lot of this stuff actually was reported in Walter Isaacson's new book about Steve Jobs, but it's interesting. There is sections on there talking about whether or not Steve Jobs experimented with drugs when he was younger in the 60s and 70s, but who cares about that? Everyone did at that time, right? What is interesting to me is it describes him as, yes, a visionary, and yes, an expert in his field and amazing creative person, but as we might have heard, but also described as an abusive boss that was shallow and callous, questions his ethics and morality. And I don't think that's so much an indictment of Steve Jobs, but I think a more interesting question about the kind of people that have these capabilities of greatness and vision, and then sometimes can be very harsh on people that maybe don't even live up to their own standards. You know what I mean?
Are you looking for excuses, Will?
I appreciate you
Amy's on fire. Really. Amy's been lighting up. The range is hot with Amy Holmes.
Let me be clear. I think I was just described as a visionary and some kind of greater human being. And yes, I do, but I think I'm nice to y'all.
Yes, very nice. Kaylee.
Well, it's kind of like our last story. Do you get that way when you get to the top, or does it take that type of person to get to the top? It's interesting.
I think it's the latter.
It is.
So, Kaylee,
so to the glitter bomb? Okay, I'm the glitter bomb story, and there's a Colorado student, 20 years old, and he threw a glitter bomb at Mitt Romney. And basically, if you haven't heard of that, that's a type of protestation of a candidate's views on gay rights, and in this case, in his conservative views in general. So he threw the glitter bomb at Mitt Romney on Tuesday, and he's potentially facing misdemeanor charges, so up to 6 months in jail and a $1,000 fine. And my take on this is he's never going to get any sort of penalty for this, because I mean, how politically incorrect would it be to do that to someone protesting on behalf of gay rights?
Yeah, no, he's going to plead it out and it won't be anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you get away with glitter bombing.
Do you think that that's appropriate?
What do you want him thrown the slammer for 6 months for glitter
I was
bombing?
gonna say,
I mean, honestly.
the libertarian in me is saying, the guy should probably pay a fine and say he'll never do it again. I mean, it's wrong, it's mean, but
rowdy, right?
But if it wasn't glitter, if it was something else,
you can't even.
Well, you can't cause injury. I mean, you can't cause injury to somebody.
Hey, listen, you get glitter in your eye, it's not pretty. I'm just gonna say that.
Okay. From some eyeliner application.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
Buck, what do you got?
Couple things going on here. There is a Sioux tribe in South Dakota that is suing, no pun intended, a bunch of major beer distributors for $500 million for the cost of health care, social services, and child rehabilitation. So they're basically suing people who sell beer because of what's happened over generations because of alcoholism on this reservation, which is apparently the size of Connecticut. So most people would take this and they'd want to discuss sort of our litigious country and the state of individual responsibility or the lack thereof. But I think it's interesting because this is actually a case about prohibition, because since 1832 you have not been allowed to have booze. So they are...
On this reservation?
Yes, yes. Okay. They have banned this substance. Should be familiar to people around the table, as we've talked about legalization. They have banned alcohol on this reservation. It obviously had zero effect, and now they're trying to sue, despite this ban on alcohol on this reservation, for $500 million because of the ill effects. So I'm thinking prohibition doesn't work, but SE's not here to defend herself.
I'm with you on that point, surprisingly.
Jedediah, you're up.
Yes, I have a story in keeping with my theme of women who kick butt this week. I have a story about the Pentagon. There are going to be new rules for women in combat. They are going to allow women to get closer to the front lines. They'll formally be able to be assigned to a battalion and serve in jobs such as medics, intelligence officers, police or communications officers, but they're still going to be prohibited from serving as infantry, armor, and special operations forces. I take issue with that. I think that men and women should be able to serve in any capacity as long as they both meet the athletic and endurance requirements. And I think if we want equality, that's equality. I don't buy these, it's sexually problematic, you're going to have flirtation, it's going to compromise. Deal with it.
Right. There are a lot of concerns. You can call me old-fashioned. I actually would agree that you should keep women out of certain combat roles, which is a much larger discussion we should have.
Nobody
but when you look at the enemies the U.S. is actually facing and you look at the problems that face a female in captivity, I have to say I think women face different threats, and I would rather them not be in those combat
Should we do away
roles.
with men and women restrooms, too? Just have unisex?
Men and women restrooms? Well, that's a little bit. That's
you guys aren't as tight as I am, so.
This is a job.
This is a big issue. I can't believe this is how we're
This is a job.
It is a big issue, but unfortunately, it's Island of Misfits. I'm sorry, but Kaylee, thank you.
Thank you
for joining us. We really appreciate it. And that's all the time we have, so be sure to follow us on Twitter at RealNewsGBTV for a sneak peek of the stories we'll be covering tomorrow. Up next is a new episode of the BS of A, and it's on New tonight. Good night, everybody.